when the juries saw these documents and saw, they were taking in certain circumstances, these huge bulk canisters of talc, and it would have like the skull and crossbones on it. God. Oh yeah. And they're pouring it into the product.
It's like out of a movie, evil villain movie. Yeah, the big skull and crossbones going into the fruit punch at the party. Yeah. Prioritizing profits. Prioritizing
dangerous drug and product cases.
Welcome everyone to Prioritizing Profits with Sarah and Ben Showard. I think this is probably going to be our first official episode. We did mess around a little bit and try to get some bloopers, a little bit of some clips maybe to post on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, get some hype going around the show, hopefully. And then this will be the first full official one.
Woohoo, rah, rah. Let's do it.
Let's go. We'll get right into introductions. If you want to go first.
Sure. I'm Sarah Showard, Showard Law. Been practicing law for about 35 years, and most of that time I have been focusing on on suing pharmaceutical companies, basically. We handle cases involving dangerous drugs, dangerous medical products, medical devices, and then also what you would consider to be regular personal injury cases.
A wide variety. And I think when most people think of personal injury, they're thinking of car crashes. That's the most common, right? Ambulance chasers.
Whoa. Watch what you say here.
But what you're doing's different. It's mass tort. And do you want to go through what makes that different than
Sure, absolutely.
PI injury?
Yeah. So when people think of car accidents, and that's of course, the classic personal injury case. And the thing about car accidents is that they are just that, they're accidents. In most cases, somebody didn't try to hit you, they didn't try to injure you. And in most cases, you're going to have insurance that's going to cover your damages, including loss of earnings, that sort of thing. I've done a lot of those, a lot of those over the years. And I do enjoy that, and I enjoy helping people in a certain kind of time of need. But what I really have a passion about is pursuing the pharmaceutical companies. And the real reason for that is that these are not accidents. These are basically intentional acts. These pharmaceutical companies calculate out what it's going to cost to pay for someone's death and compare that to how many millions and oftentimes billions of dollars they're going to make on a particular drug. And the only way to stop them is to sue them, unfortunately. Hit them where it hurts, hit them in the pocketbook. And it's very difficult for an individual person to take on a huge conglomerate corporation like this. But through this process of handling mass torts, what happens is that attorneys from many law firms across the country band together to take on the pharmaceutical company, and that's how it works. And really, it's protecting people. It's helping people who have been injured by a drug or medical device, but it's also kind of slapping the pharmaceutical companies and making sure that they don't do that in the future.
And stay in line and follow a certain level of moral compass, I would say.
It's a pretty low bar, but yeah, I'll try not to kill people. We're trying to, the whole idea behind drugs and medical devices are that you're making people's lives better. You're getting, you're helping them with awful symptoms they have. You're giving them their life back. If you're having a knee or hip replacement, you can, get your mobility back, all of that. It's supposed to help. It's not supposed to hurt, and it's certainly not supposed to kill you. And even if there's risks with these things, okay, there's risks in life, but tell us about it. And, and that's one of the things people always say, these drug commercials, it's all blah, 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 this can happen and that can happen. And yeah, and fine, if you tell me that can happen to me, then I can make a decision. I can make an informed decision about whether I want to take that risk. And if I take that risk and the bad thing happens, I've got no case. That's fine. But if you don't tell me about some horrible situation that could happen, some horrible risk, then I wasn't in a position to make an informed decision, and I should be able to be compensated if this awful risk I had no idea about occurs.
100%. I think the biggest difference that you kind of touched on there is that with personal injury, car accidents, they're accidents. No one wants to be in a car accident. But with these mass tort cases where there's these pharmaceutical companies, there's side effects to these drugs that they're either aware of and they just don't mention, or they're not aware of, they know it's not safe, and they still put it out there. And the fact that there's equations that can essentially give value to human life and figure out whether or not it's worthwhile financially for these companies to be putting out these harmful drugs that they know are going to cause massive problems for thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of individuals throughout the country, and do it anyways because they know that they'll still make a profit on it, even if they get sued by every one of those individuals.
Absolutely. Although there are some tricks of the trade, and we're going to talk about one of those today.
Yeah, and I think this kind of loops into why we're doing this full podcast overall. I think that you released some teasers on Facebook, and a lot of people were asking questions about what exactly we would be speaking about. The importance behind having kind of a law-based podcast or one that's more focused on mass torts. And I think when we discussed it, one of the biggest reasons for doing this is public awareness.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, the consumers and even the doctors are sometimes the last to find out about these problems. And you were talking before about, sometimes the drug companies release a drug and they know certain problems and don't warn about them. But there are other situations, maybe less nefarious, at least at the beginning, where they release a drug and they honestly don't know about a certain side effect, but it's a new drug. And so over the course of, those initial years, they start seeing some concerning patterns or some concerning issues. And all of a sudden it becomes clear that while they didn't know before, now they know that this can cause some real serious problems. And it is incumbent upon them at that time to warn. And then they choose not to do that. So, and oftentimes the attorneys are the ones who hear about these things. Oh, I took this medication and I started having these symptoms. That's not something that was warned about. And then as we do more research, we can find these other studies. Again, they're post-market studies, and the drug companies have absolutely no impetus to broadcast these problems. So oftentimes that's how it comes out.
Definitely less nefarious, right? They're not putting a drug on the market that they know have these specific issues that they aren't telling people about. But once the drug's out for a few years and things start popping up and there's trends that are noticeable, and then they still choose not to say anything. And I think it's crazy to me to hear that, of the last people to find out that some of these drugs or these devices are having issues are the doctors themselves, which is insane. I mean, when I go to the doctor, when I'm sick, my first thought is I need to go to the doctor, and they're going to tell me what's wrong. They're going to tell me what I need to take or what I need to do to feel better. And whatever it is, no matter how ridiculous, if it's 10-second handstands every morning to stop a headache, hey, if the doctor says I got to do it, right? I mean, I don't know what I'm talking about. He does. And so, someone that in my life I would trust to give me health advice are the people that are finding out about this stuff last.
And actually, that makes perfect sense because, like you said, you're going to trust them. So if they know and they don't prescribe it, that's the problem. So the doctors, and again, these drug companies are going in, they have their drug reps, they're going in there and they're, singing the praises of this drug. And the absolute last thing they're going to do is tell the doctor the problems. And most often when you go to the doctor, you're going to a primary care provider, and they don't have time to be researching every single different area. I mean, they're kind of like the first level, and they absolutely are going to be the ones that it's hidden from. I mean, there was back in the days when we were pursuing the Actos cases, it was a diabetes medication that was causing bladder cancer, and I mean, these drug reps were told, whatever you do, don't say that C word.
Wow.
Do not say the C word. And if you get asked about that C word, do whatever you have to do to distract. We do not want them to know this. Again, if they know this, they're not going to prescribe it. And as you were saying too, that this finding out about it post-market, there's actually a bigger investment at that point. If they find out early on in the development phase, again, they oftentimes still put it out, but they lose less if they stop at that point. Mm-hmm. If they go forward and they spend billions and billions and billions of dollars on these marketing campaigns and producing this medication, they've really invested. And to pull it now, that's a big loss.
Yeah, I'm sure. Because I mean, millions and millions of dollars, tens of millions go into each one of these drugs.
Promoting them. And I mean, look, just turn on your TV and you'll see how many of the commercials are you watching are about the new drug. So that, and it's direct to consumer, but they want you to go in and ask your doctor, no, I don't want that one. I want this one.
And I think for people that are listening, they maybe had no idea what mass torts were before this, or they didn't know much about personal injury and pharmaceutical companies and the stuff that was kind of going on behind the scenes. I feel like this is probably a massive wake-up call. This is shocking. I wouldn't even believe it, right? I mean, hearing that these pharmaceutical reps are going to the doctors, going to my doctor's office, recommending medication that they know will cause cancer, and are being told to hide it from doctors. I mean, this is like conspiracy theory, all the way up there to the top.
That's real life, unfortunately. It's a big industry.
Yeah, and clearly because there's people like yourself that are making a living off of pursuing these pharmaceutical companies that have more nefarious actions behind them. Right. I think it's probably good just to give some examples or go into some previous ones or ones that you may be working on right now. What are some of the cases that you're focused on at the moment?
Well, actually, if I could just maybe step back a little bit as far as why we're doing this, I think it's important to, since, as we've discussed, sometimes the doctors and the patients are the last ones to hear about these problems. And it's really a strange thing that the attorneys are kind of on the forefront oftentimes.
Yeah.
And so what I'm hoping that this podcast can do, again, is to, as we learn about these things, and there are some cases that I've been working on for years, but the average person probably has absolutely no idea about it. So this is more of an opportunity for us to say, hey, here are some of these risks. Again, they're not warned about. And if you are using these products, make an informed decision, hear from the other side. Right now, you're getting a very biased very biased angle on the whole thing. You're getting, what they're paying the advertising agencies to talk about on TV. And so I'm hoping that this is an opportunity for people to learn about some dangerous things and decide if they want to use them or not.
And what's even scarier about that is that I think a lot of people kind of get confused, and they think a lot of these issues are focused on prescription medication. I think that there's the most common, the ones that we see in news is prescription medications that have side effects that weren't mentioned that, millions of people are on and they're experiencing these issues. But realistically, these type of cases can come from anywhere. They can come from, devices that I know that you're working with hernia mesh for a while. Mm-hmm. They can come from over-the-counter products. I know right now you're working on hair relaxer as well. And that's something that anyone could just go into Walgreens and pick up. And there's serious issues connected to those.
Well, there's serious issues. And the other thing about the over-the-counter products and the cosmetics, the drug company, or I shouldn't say drug companies, but the cosmetic companies, they don't even have to list all of the ingredients if it's not a drug.
Insane.
Yeah. So it's a lot easier to get away with on those.
And they can kind of sneak things in there because they don't have to list them. And then obviously it kind of comes up later down the road that there's issues. Well,
they can put things in and they can also take things out, what we sometimes call a silent recall. Mm-hmm. And that actually happened with the denture cream cases that had an excessive amount of zinc. And when you absorb zinc, your body can no longer absorb copper, and it could lead to all sorts of problems, peripheral neuropathy, numbness. I mean, people were in wheelchairs as a result of this. And so when these cases started happening, they were like, oh, okay, well, we'll just start pulling the zinc out of the product. The new products don't have it. And then the people couldn't even prove their case, even though they were already suffering from the side effects and the permanent injuries when they were using the product that had it in it. But it didn't say it.
It didn't say it before, and it didn't say it after the silent recall, which just made it even more difficult on your end of things of trying to figure out, people that were taking it, were they taking it before they silently got rid of the chemical that was causing all these issues?
Well, and some of it was silent, and some of it, as people started hearing about this, and again, still, most people probably have never heard about this problem. Some of the brands would come out and would say zinc-free. Whoa, hey, we didn't even know there was zinc in it to
start. Didn't know zinc was a problem.
But okay, zinc-free, I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And it was a good thing.
And how does this work with the FDA? Because I think whenever I talk to any of my friends and tell them about what you do or anything like that, one of their first responses, "Oh, we got the FDA. FDA's looking over us. It's approved. What type of issues could be in here?"
Yeah, well, so the FDA is great. It's a good thing that we have the FDA, but what the FDA does and what people think the FDA does is dramatically different. People think that the FDA has all of these scientists and they're doing all of these studies and they're testing all of these products, and that's not the case. I mean, it's a government agency. They do not have the ability to do that. What happens is that the drug companies do their own studies, and then they submit the studies to the FDA in the process of trying to get the product approved. Are those studies biased? Well, hell yeah, a lot of the time.
And they can pick and choose, right? I mean, they can really cherry pick these studies on which ones they want to send over to the FDA.
Oh yeah, and then they just stop studies sometimes. Oh, things aren't looking so good. Oh well, we're not going to continue.
First half's looking a lot better. I think we'll just stick with this one.
Do a different study. Focus on, yeah. And, there have been a lot of stories kind of over the years about people being very biased, perhaps bribed. There was a case I was involved in years ago where it was determined that participants in the study who had died just were erased out of the study, so as if they were never in it to start with. So there's some pretty extreme situations that happen. Again, it's big dollars. If we can get this thing approved, we can get it on the market.
And it seems like almost like a systematic issue, right? Because I mean, these pharmaceutical companies, they're investing tens, hundreds of millions of dollars into these prescription, these medications, these devices, whatever they may be. And then obviously issues are coming up. They don't want to lose money. They're sending over the cherry-picked research cases over to the FDA, who's just a governmental agency. They don't know what's going on. They're just taking what they get, accepting it based off that. And then it's going out over the counter, where if it's over the counter beauty products, they don't even have to mention what's in it. They can take out and put stuff in there without saying anything. Doctors are being lied to. Lawyers are the people that are figuring things out first. I mean, is there a singular pain point here, or is this just a systematic issue overall?
Well, I think it is a systematic issue. I mean, that's certainly a huge problem to try to get into and address. But there are little things and little changes that can be made, hopefully, to make it somewhat better. When we talk about FDA approval, there's also like an FDA clearance, and that is a much lesser standard. And oftentimes the way that happens is that, say you have a device and you're saying, well, this is a substantially similar device. It's basically the same thing. It's just some little tweaks here and there. And so we shouldn't have to go through this whole big, crazy, expensive and multi-year long process to get it approved. Let's just get it cleared based on the other product. And that makes sense logically. And in certain circumstances, absolutely, that's as it should be. But there are sometimes where the change is huge. And a perfect example are these metal-on-metal hips. Well, they base the metal-on-metal hips. It's the same design, but a different product. Well, this product, oh, holy crap. I mean, it's metal-on-metal. And as the ball moves in the joint, there's little slivers of metal that's coming off and it's getting absorbed into your bloodstream and into your tissue. So changing the materials is actually a huge change.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that we're doing this podcast. We're not trying to change the system. I don't think we're going to be able to. Maybe we make people
it'd be really awesome.
You never know. Maybe we get enough pull, enough power. Say.
Yeah. Well, so we're not going to change the system, but each person who maybe avoids using a certain product, who doesn't take a risk that they don't want to take a risk, I think that's a win just in and of itself. And just letting people know. I mean, again, it's not something that they want out there in the news. I mean, and when it does hit the news, it comes out and it's just like a flash in the pan. I mean, it's, one day they're talking about it on Today's Show. And if you didn't catch that segment, you don't know about it. And it's not something, that people are commonly aware of unless it becomes a huge issue.
And I think you mentioned this earlier. You've been doing this for 35 years, so you know what it's like to market things like this, right? Like market it in a mass toward where, you're trying to find a needle in a haystack at times. A lot of these people don't know that there's any issues with the products that they're using. They don't know that some of the issues that they are currently facing right now are from products that they're using that they have no clue that it's not told to them that it's going to be a side effect or that these chemicals are in there. And to find that information is incredibly difficult. Like you mentioned, they don't want it out in the news. They don't
Right.
want it easily accessible.
Yeah.
And even though there are many law firms like your own that try to put that information out there, sometimes, for me personally, it can be hard to digest. You look at some of these conditions and some of these products and the words, the big words they use, it's a little scary.
Yeah.
But, hopefully, especially with this podcast, we'll be able to go through some of the products that are, on the market right now that you can go into the store and see on the shelves that are having these massive issues that can, cause cancer. I keep coming back to this hair relaxer because it's one of the most surprising ones that, you can literally go into the store, pick it up, and there's studies that show that it will cause cancer.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I care that is a really big issue for me is helping people to understand maybe why something happened or why they're having symptoms and how they could stop having those problems. And this kind of goes back to the denture cream situation where, it was almost inconceivable to people. People were they were ending up in wheelchairs and they were being tested, for ALS, for MS, for, spinal injuries, for diabetic neuropathy, all of these things. The doctors just couldn't figure out why all of a sudden, they couldn't walk. They were becoming crippled. And who in the world is going to think, oh, maybe it's my denture cream? Absolutely not. And one of the things that it's probably one of the true highlights of my career were just the people who I could give them an answer. The doctors couldn't figure it out, and we're like, hey, well, do a heavy metal test. It's not a standard test. It's absolutely not a standard test. The doctors wouldn't even agree to it. A lawyer wants me to do this test. I'm not doing this test. We actually ended up hiring a mobile lab who went to their homes and did the test.
Wow.
And if it came out that they had high levels of zinc and low levels of copper, wow, okay, there's a good chance that your problems are related to the denture cream you're using. Who would have thought?
That's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
You're waking up and not being able to walk and it being connected to your denture cream. That is absurd.
And so you keep using it. But if you knew that, hey, the denture cream is a dangerous thing, there are other brands of denture cream, or let your go toothless. I don't know. Let it.
And at this point, they were aware of it, right? They knew that it was causing these issues, causing these problems. They're, trying to cover it up as much as they can. Meanwhile, there's, these geriatrics that are taking denture cream, and
you would be surprised. There were some young people who had different issues that caused them to wear dentures. It wasn't all geriatrics.
That's
and
fair.
Don't be saying anything about that, because I might be in that category or hovering at the verge of it. So watch it there.
Yeah, but I think it is important to kind of get that information out there. And I think that's definitely what we're going to be focused on, but we'll be going over a lot of different variety of topics overall, and just kind of revamping a lot of your marketing overall. TikTok, YouTube, Facebook.
All right, that's on you, buddy.
I know
I'm doing it. It's
you're the face of the
painful.
brand.
Yeah, I know, but I'm an old dog trying to learn new tricks. It's a little painful, but I gotta move forward.
That's fair. That's fair.
So all good. Dragged, kicking and screaming by my son.
So I think we could probably just go into some of the cases that you're looking into now. Probably just briefly go over, I know that there's always many cases going on. There's always a lot of faulty products and prescription medications out there. But, I know that there are some over-the-counter ones, some of the more common ones. So if you want to go over into some of them that people should maybe be keeping an eye out in case they see them on the counters.
Well, so I'd say the over-the-counter product that is really the focus of our firm and a lot of others right now are the hair relaxers, the hair straighteners. Again, an over-the-counter product, something you can just buy at the drugstore. And the issue with that is that the chemicals that they're using are greatly increasing the risk of uterine cancer. And so this also kind of links into what we were saying about having symptoms or problems and having no idea what might have caused them. And these cases really came to light because there were young women who were not high risk for uterine cancer. And I should just step back and say uterine cancer is a very rare cancer. So you had young women with no family history, no risk factors, and they were getting uterine cancer. And it's like, what's going on here? This, something's going on here. Well, it turned out that there was a link to these products. And if they were using this over-the-counter hair straightener product on a regular basis, and it's the type of product you do use on a regular basis, as your hair grows out, you're going to reapply it. And these chemicals are getting absorbed into the scalp. And they're also very caustic, and so they could cause, lesions and rashes and ways for the chemical to get into your scalp. Again, these women just assumed, well, this is just really horrible luck that I've got cancer at age 30 with no risk factor. And it turns out that there was a reason. It was this product. And it is a product that is used very heavily, particularly in the African American community. And again, it's just something that I would say the average person doesn't know it's even a risk. And if they know, they can do a little more research, and they can make a decision on whether they want to take that risk or not.
Yeah, and I think this does kind of connect back to the denture cream, because it's the same situation where, someone's diagnosed with uterine cancer, the last thing that they're going to think is it's going to be some hair product that they're putting on their head, once a week, every other week.
The head, the uterus. I mean, there's a big space.
Both are on the body, I guess, but that's about the only connection there. That is insane. And so when it's products like this with a hair relaxer, is it usually one brand, like one specific one, or are there several brands that are kind of just piggybacking off each other, doing similar things, and then it all comes to light?
So it's usually not just one brand. And again, it's going to be a particular chemical that works very well with this. So most of the companies are going to use those chemicals, and then it maybe has a slightly different scent, or it has other different additive products. But oftentimes it is multiple brands using the same ingredients or the problematic ingredient. And that can be a little bit complicated also, because quite often with denture cream, with hair relaxers, maybe you go back and forth. You use L'Oreal this time, you use a different one the next time. And so, well, who do you sue? And in these types of cases, a lot of the time, the mass tort will have multiple defendants, and they will each be partially at fault. And so you can collect from both of them.
Yeah, and I can imagine that's probably very difficult for the victims as well, because, they're keeping track of what hair product they've been using for the last several years. I know some people are very brand loyal. I am as well. I use a very specific shampoo and conditioner, but I know there's other people that like to switch around. They like to change it up. And so keeping track of, what hair product you used a year ago that could have caused uterine cancer is kind of a tall order.
And sometimes this one's on sale, or they don't have this one, and this other one basically does the same thing. So, yeah, there is some mixing and matching going on there, and that does, again, with most of the over-the-counter products, that happens. And you look at the Tylenol cases. Tylenol is a brand name, but there's a gazillion acetaminophen. You can buy the Walmart brand, you can buy, the Walgreens brand. You can, there's
a million off brands.
Yeah.
And so for cases like this, where I think is, maybe this is a good question: is this more common or less common for there to be cases where there's over-the-counter products? There's a ton of different brands, and there's a younger age group kind of getting affected with this, right? I know you mentioned the denture cream. There were some younger individuals that may have surprised me within that group, but I would argue there's probably more younger individuals using a hair relaxer than using denture cream.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you'd actually, one of the really offensive things about the hair relaxers is that there's actually a brand that targets children.
That's insane.
Yeah, these poor little girls are being told at a very young age, you're not okay how you are naturally. You need to change your hair. Unfortunately, culturally and familiar, they're buying into it, and they're starting these products at really young ages. And so you're seeing, these diseases, these cancers that you don't expect to see in very young women. And here's why. So
we've gone over the hair relaxer, but like I said earlier, I know you have several cases, and I know you have the talcum powder, right?
So we've been involved in the talcum powder cases for quite a while. But there was a huge development just this past week in these cases, and things were looking really, really bad.
Well, maybe let's say for people that don't know what talcum powder is, because I'm in that boat, give us a quick overview of the case so far.
Sorry. See, this is why I need you. I just dive right in and assume everybody knows exactly what I know about this situation. Right. So talcum powder, I mean, everybody knows about Johnson & Johnson's baby powder, and most people have probably used it. It's not quite, used in the ways that it was historically.
And Johnson & Johnson, this is the same Johnson & Johnson for vaccines, right?
It's the same Johnson & Johnson for all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, they are huge, multi-billion, I think $44 billion company. They're everywhere. But so one of their biggest products was the Johnson's baby powder. And it's been heavily marketed, advertised basically forever, as, before I was born. And the problem with it is that talc comes from talc mines, and it can contain asbestos. And actually just the talc itself, the talc fibers. And so the way that it was advertised to be used, and again, this is kind of an earlier generation, even technically before me, women were told that they should use it on their genitals, like after the shower, and you don't want to be sweaty, you don't want to be moist, you want to, powder off. And the problem with that was that the talcum powder was actually getting up and into their ovaries and causing ovarian cancer.
Jesus.
This is with repeated use. It's the same thing you put on little babies' butts, right? And then also other people, men would sometimes use it on their chests. If you inhale it, it can cause mesothelioma.
Wow.
And if it gets, it could also, the big issues are the mesothelioma and the ovarian cancer. And so this came to light, and it turned out that, this has been going on for years and years and years. There were studies specifically saying that, hey, this is problematic. There was always an alternative. You could always use cornstarch or cornmeal. But there's always been alternatives. And quite frankly, it was just unnecessary to start with. They knew, and, there are various inside documents showing that they knew about these problems, but they were just making all this money on it, and they just would not change it. And so the lawsuits started, and when the juries saw these documents and saw, they were taking in certain circumstances, these huge bulk canisters of talc, and it would have like the skull and crossbones on it. God. Oh yeah. And they're pouring it into the product.
It's like out of a movie, evil villain movie. Yeah, the big skull and crossbones going into the fruit punch at the party.
Yeah, but so they started getting hit, and they started getting hit big and with punitive damages. Huge verdicts. There was, they had. Before they put the kibosh on it, which we'll talk about, like $3.5 billion in verdicts. There was one case involving 22 women where they awarded them more than $2 billion. Oh my God. So they were getting hit, and they were getting hit hard.
Yeah.
And so what they did was they were like, oh, whoa, we got to stop this. And they, so this is what's in the news is what's called the Texas two-step. And it was a tactic that they used. And so what they did was they said, okay, we're going to develop a subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson. It was called LTL. So we're going to make this other little entity over here, and we're going to put all of the talc cases over into this other entity. And we're going to give them $2 billion. Cool. It sounds like a lot of money. And so that's its own business. It's over there. It's not Johnson & Johnson. It's LTL. Johnson & Johnson is bankrupt, but LTL is bankrupt. And so they put it into the bankruptcy process. And this was actually moving forward. All of the cases got put on hold. The bankruptcy court was upholding it. They put, stays. And it was appealed to the Third Circuit. And what happened on January 30th is that the Third Circuit came out with its decision saying, no, you can't do this.
Thank God. Okay.
Right? Saying, no, this is not done in good faith.
Yeah.
And the scary thing about this, well, now, of course, Johnson & Johnson has, more money than God or whatever. They're going to appeal it to the Supreme Court, and we don't know what's going to happen at the Supreme Court. Also, lawmakers were looking at this knowing, whoa, this is clearly
a terrible, this shouldn't work.
This is not cool. And Johnson & Johnson, they're not, insolvent. They're not having any financial issues. They can pay these verdicts,
if they wanted to.
Right. But they don't want to. And so other companies were looking at that too, and they're like, wow.
That's a good idea.
It's a damn good idea.
Why didn't we think of that shit?
Yeah. And so it was really scary for a lot of us and should be for everybody that if companies can just do this, they're now out of the whole system. You can't hold them accountable.
At all.
Because, if they start getting hit, if they get caught, if they get busted doing these bad things and they start getting sued and they get these verdicts, they just make it a little subsidiary, let it go bankrupt, it goes away. So, thank goodness. I mean, there's been some serious partying and celebrating on the part of the plaintiffs bar and people who care about injured people.
Yeah.
And really everybody should. But again, it's kind of like this little area that I think not a lot of people got the significance.
Yeah, I hadn't heard at all about that. I haven't seen that anywhere, but I think that's massive news, right? Because I think you mentioned it is if pharmaceutical companies know that they can do this, they can create this small little subsidiary that they can just put all their baggage under and say, oh, well, that sucks, man. Wish we didn't do that.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's not even a point for the equation of, how much money do we need to make for it to break even? At that point, it's just like, how many products can we get out there and give to our subsidiary?
Yeah, well, and so there were about 38,000 cases pending that were being affected by this bankruptcy. And we know they gave them the $2 billion, but they've already blown that with the past verdict. So people coming along now would have nothing.
Yeah,
like it's bankruptcy. Yeah. So I'm really hopeful. I'm guardedly optimistic. I mean. But for now, the 38,000 cases are alive and moving forward. We are still accepting talcum powder cases. I think a lot of people were like, oh, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a sad thing to tell people when they call and they're telling you they lost their mother to ovarian cancer, and you'd have to tell them this situation. Like, yeah, it looks like you have a strong case here. However, here's what's going on. And nobody, it may be that nobody ever gets compensated because of this little trick that they've got going on.
And this is with Johnson & Johnson, who had known about this, because it sounds like this product is really old. I mean, this has been around for a while, right?
Been around for a long time.
30, 50 years, it sounded like somewhere around there.
Well, more than that, because it's before me. So.
Yeah, okay. So it's been a while, and they've known about it for a while and continued to leave it out there. So I'm assuming the victims of a case like this must be immense. I mean, massive.
Well, yeah. So the real studies that were showing the problems with it, there were a lot of those in the 70s. But yeah, it kind of goes back to the same situation we were talking about on other cases. How many thousands and thousands of women have died of ovarian cancer?
Thought they were unlucky.
Well, yeah, they thought they were unlucky. Who knows? But I mean, they had no clue that it was this household daily product that they were using that they could have stopped any time.
Yeah.
And so it goes again. Here's something. If you know about this, and we can tell people about it, and people, can stop using the product, use something else. That's a huge win.
Yeah.
And actually, just a kind of a little. Kind of follow up on that. After all of these years and all this litigation, finally, Johnson & Johnson has indicated that they're not going to be using talc in these products anymore.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah,
oh, we got that one. It was small wins, baby.
Small wins. But is it about us or is it about them?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, fine. We're paying too much at this point.
Yeah.
So,
all right, you guys hit us hard enough. We'll finally change what we've been doing for the last 70 years.
Right. I mean, and hopefully all cases don't take 70 years. I mean... how many lives could be, how many lives were lost unnecessarily?
It's a great point. I mean, I think it's something like that where even products that have been around for 60, 70 years are products that could have these type of issues, and I know whenever I ever got medication, you'd always ask the doctor, right? You'd be like, how long has this been on the market? General rule of thumb is like 5 to 10 years before, when the serious issues, the real bad ones start coming out and when you can know, what a drug does. But then there's still cases like this where 70 years later and it's still coming out. And yeah, people knew it was going on, but it wasn't common knowledge. Lawyers didn't know it was going on. There was just people behind closed doors.
Yeah. Well, and one of the kind of just on the kind of the front of tips, it's funny that you mentioned that because people get really excited when they're like, oh my gosh, it's this new drug and I'm so excited and I don't want this old drug I'm taking. I want the new drug that's out here because newer is better.
Yeah.
Well, maybe maybe it is, maybe it isn't. And a lot of the new drugs, that's how they make their money. It's just the hype that it's something new and different, and they're maybe tweaking just little small things. And then also there's like the issue of the patent. If their old patent is expiring, then they're going to want to tweak it a little bit so that they can get a new patent and so that it can be exclusive. And so, but my thing was the opposite. And it's funny because it did come up with you on a number of occasions. And okay, well, here's the new medication. And I'm like, I would, if a medication's been around for a while, yeah, there's problems, but we probably know more of what they are. Again, some of them may be hidden, but the things that are disclosed as they come out have had time to come out. And, my little rule of thumb has always been, I don't really want something, unless there's no other option, I don't want something unless it's been out for about 7 years. And again, some things are going to take a lot longer than that to develop. A lot of cancers and that sort of thing. But you're going to see a lot in those, in those initial years of potential problems. And hopefully the drug company is being honest and updating as those things come out. You're going to know more than you knew at the beginning. So I'm not excited about brand new drugs.
No, I know that for a fact. And I think it's interesting kind of talking about brand new drugs and Johnson & Johnson, because I know we've spoken about this in the past. With the vaccines, right? Like Johnson & Johnson, the new thing for them was the one stick. That's all you need. You don't need 2 shots. Everyone was doing the 2 shots. And then Johnson & Johnson came out and said, well, we're the first ones with the 1 shot.
Right.
And I think now you can't even really get that very many places. I think you have to kind of go out of your way to get the 1 stick. There were some big problems with that, and there were certain groups of people who it was not good for. And honestly, I would like to get onto a rant about this, but I think for political reasons, I won't go into the whole vaccine thing. Yeah, I'll say
it's a hot topic.
We're not an anti-vax podcast in any way.
No.
Any way, I think it's just with our background, hesitancy is always.
Well, keeping your eyes open,
maybe
being cautious, and just being a little bit nervous about anything that had to happen really fast.
Mm-hmm.
But again, no, actually, I've had my vaccine, So we've been talking about the drugs and medical devices, but of course we certainly do car accidents. I have always done car accidents since I was basically in the womb or something like that, pretty close. But there's always, interesting and different aspects about them. The classic car accident, of course, you're in an accident, there's the other person's insurance pays, that sort of thing. But actually one of the reasons why we had a gap in our podcasts is that our lovely host here was involved in his own car accident, and it was a little bit different and unusual, and raised some issues that are not the norm. So I thought maybe we could dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, it was definitely an eventful last week. I was here last week recording our first show. I don't think that's going to be a full show. We were kind of just testing out, figuring it out, and it was Thursday. It's been about 2 weeks since it. I think 2 weeks to the day. We're in Arizona, and I was down here in Tucson, and I live up in Scottsdale, so it was about an hour and a half drive to get back home. And it's on the highway, not bad traffic, pretty easy, out in the desert, nothing too crazy. And there's a halfway point. It's a perfect halfway point. It's about an hour and a half, 2 hours, so about 45 minutes down the road, you get to Casa Grande, Florence Boulevard Highway, where you have a Chick-fil-A and an In-N-Out across the street from each other in the middle of nowhere. The line's always dead, and you're on a car drive. It's fantastic. There's no better fast food than In-N-Out or Chick-fil-A. If you disagree, you're just wrong.
Okay, now let me just add that they are not sponsoring this podcast. No. We have no financial.
Not yet. I'd love to have a nice spicy chicken right here in the center, but no. So I get off the exit, and I'm just kind of listening to my tunes, slowly going up the ramp, going about 40, slowing down, getting to the light. And all of a sudden, blammy, gets slammed in the back, rear-ended, back right. I'm shocked. I have my little puppy, my dog, in my lap. We're panicked a little bit. Hits back right really hard because we're getting off the highway, and I was going about 30, 40. He was going about 70. My car kind of slides a little bit. You can hear the skidding. and you can see this beat down car just kind of go to the right of me, and he just tries to keep on going. I mean, he doesn't have a care in the world. He's just trying to get out of there. I hear sirens right behind me, and I'm like, oh, thank God, that worked out perfectly. You know, they saw all that happen. I don't have to worry about like
calling the police.
You know,
they're like on it.
They're on it. You know, they're doing a good job today. Shit. But yeah, so they pull up. They're right behind me. All of a sudden, 6 cop cars pull up, surround him. One cop car passed me. Like, you all right? I'm like, yeah. I mean, how do I look, man? I'm fucking sideways in the middle of the road. My entire bumper's off my car. I'm doing fantastic. Turns out the guy was being chased down for human trafficking, was running from the police. It was a full-on car chase and hit me. He tried to keep on going, but his tire, because usually your tire is like, you know, right ways, it was sideways on the ground, just skidding on the tar.
Oh man. Well, you took it out. You took his tire
I did.
out.
I did what I had to. You know, there was a car chase. The police needed a little bit of help, so I stepped in, did what I could, and you know, I've heard the word local hero thrown around here and there.
Okay, let's just be clear, though. Let's just be clear, because I know you have a great sense of humor, and you actually made a joke with the cop about that. And he asked you if you really did it, and you did not.
No. He was worried. He was like, he was like, did you actually swerve in front of him? I was like, Jesus Christ, no. I'm trying to get a spicy chicken and get home. Okay, nothing more, nothing less. And he was like, okay, thank God, because they do have people. They have people that when they're in a car chase that will try to get in the way of the car.
Oh.
And sometimes they'll even call the 18-wheelers. They'll call the 18-wheelers and be like, hey, we have a car chase. Like, it's coming up to you, because they're on the radio as well, and tell them to go sideways on the road to stop it.
Wow, that's like really taking one for the team. That's kind of
Anyway,
well, I'm glad you don't do that, and I would definitely say, please don't ever do that. There's for a variety of reasons, not the least of which you would be hurt. I don't want you hurt.
I had some precious cargo, my dog Bruno, but he's all good. We're both okay, not injured at all. Car's totaled, unfortunately, but.
Well, and you were injured. You're just better now.
True. Yeah. I mean, I was definitely pretty sore. I was surprised because it didn't feel painful when it happened, but the next day when I woke up, my entire back it was like I had just hit the best back day of my life the day before. I mean, I was absurdly sore. But, you know, after a few days, it went away.
Well, and so that's the thing too. A lot of people, right after they're in an accident, they're like, "Oh, I'm fine." But you know, you've got all of this adrenaline going, and really, it takes a couple of days. I mean, they say 48, 72 hours before you really know you have problems. And some insurance companies will jump in there and they'll try to, in fact, I was in a car accident ages ago, and I remember they called me up and they're like, "Hello, how are you doing?" And I said, "I'm fine." And just like fine, how are you? Oh, good, I'm glad you're fine. So you don't have any injuries. We can give you $500 today and be done. And I'm like, whoa. It's a figure of speech. I'm fine. I mean, I'm actually sore. And, give me some time to take a breath and figure out what's going on. So yeah, on car accidents, oftentimes that's it does take a few days.
Mm-hmm. And I was pretty worried about this because I've been in fender benders before, but this was different, right? I mean, it's a car chase.
Yeah, that was pretty scary.
Yeah, and there was like 6 or 7 cops surrounding the guy right off the rip. I mean, they weren't even talking to me. I had a few of them come in there while they were walking by to go see this mastermind criminal. They were like, "Hey, are you doing all right?" And I was like,
"How's the victim?"
Yeah, I was like, "Oh, I'm doing good." And they just kept on going. But, I didn't know how to really approach a situation like that, because I even asked them, I was like, does he have any insurance? And they're like, he has a record for stealing cars. And this one looks like it might be in that as well. So probably not.
Yeah.
And I was just, what do you do? What do I
Well, you call your mother.
That's what I did. I was stranded in the middle of the desert. No water, no food.
Oh, please.
No civilization.
There was a Chick-fil-A, like walking distance.
I was waiting at a Chick-fil-A. That is true. But yeah, and before working on his, I was a legal assistant at a personal injury law firm, and they always said to always call a lawyer whenever you're in a car accident, even if it's your fault or if it's not your fault, no matter what. Just because insurance companies can definitely be a little sneaky with some of their tactics. So I called you right away, and I wasn't sure, what the next steps were, but now I'm being represented.
You're my favorite client. Sorry, everybody, but I got to be honest here. So, one of the things I just wanted to touch on about that, too, because, again, it's an unusual situation, is what kind of insurance people have or should have. And a lot of times people kind of poo-poo the whole uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage. And they're, if I'm in an accident, the other person's insurance will cover me. And if they have insurance, but a lot of people do not. It's a big issue here. And if they're involved in criminal conduct, it's not going to apply anyway. Stolen vehicles, all of these things. And so you'll see a lot of times people say, I have full coverage. And maybe they do. They have some or uninsured motorist coverage. But they get that in like the minimal limits, whereas they have a higher limit that's going to protect other people. I'm like, come on. I mean, you should protect yourself at least as much as you're protecting other people. And it's interesting, at least here, you cannot buy higher limits for yourself or on and under than you have for liability. So you can't protect yourself more, but you should protect yourself as much.
At the very least.
Yeah. And so, but so there's that issue. And also, if you don't have collision coverage, you would not be able to get your car repaired. Again, if that person doesn't have insurance or if it's a criminal situation, you're always going to have to pay the deductible. But those are, reasons why it's really important to make sure that you have decent coverage.
Yeah, when I was working as a legal assistant, I was shocked. I didn't even know UM or UIM was a thing. Because, especially when I was younger, 16, getting my license, it was assumption, everyone has if you're driving, you have your license, you have insurance, you have your registration, everything's set.
Yeah.
And then
everybody.
You realize, a few months at a law firm, personal injury law firm, and you're like, wow, okay, a lot of people don't have insurance. A lot of people are driving really recklessly and, just don't care to have registration or any of that. And it's a lot more of a common issue. And when you talk to individuals that get into these car accidents and they have coverage, but the people that they crashed into or had crashed into them don't have insurance, and then they don't have UM or UIM or don't have enough UIM, and they can't get any coverage or repairs. I mean, it's
it can be devastating.
Terrible.
It can really be devastating.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was a crazy experience overall. Luckily, I'm safe, recovered.
You don't have a new car yet.
No new car yet. Got a rental. Got my car totaled, which is definitely just a kind of crazy. One morning, and everything's fine. Next by the end of the day, I don't have a car, and I'm stranded slightly, but
luckily there's Uber Eats.
Oh my
gosh, and they're not advertising. This isn't advertising for them either. But.
I know. I would love to Uber Eats over spicy chicken if I could. That 2-for-1 brand deal right there. Shit. But yeah, everything's good. We'll be car shopping coming up here real soon. And then we have the AAJ this weekend as well. Massive lawyer convention in Scottsdale this week. Usually in Vegas, my preferred destination.
Whoa, wait a minute. That's AAJ. It's always in February and July, and it travels around the country. You're probably thinking of Mass Torts Made Perfect, which is always in Vegas, and that's always in April and October. Yes, but AAJ, that's American Association for Justice, and that convention is happening this weekend in Phoenix. And so we will all be up there and schmoozing and learning and getting updated on all sorts of cases, and certainly we'll be glad to share that on the next podcast.
And these events are where you kind of get the updates for the cases that you're currently working on, and then hear, rumblings about possible upcoming cases that.
Well, it's a great opportunity. I mean, it's attorneys from all over the country. And so, for example, the first time I really got involved with the litigation groups was back in the days of the Denture cream. And I had got my first Denture cream case, and I was researching it. And all of a sudden I was like, whoa, there's a Denture cream litigation group. There are other people who are handling these cases. And it happened to be in Maui at the time, so I had to fly out to Maui and meet. But it's great because it was a miserable sacrifice I had to make, but it was for my clients.
Yeah.
Only fair. So it was just so great because you were sitting in a room with all of these other people who are doing the same cases. It was just my first experience, and then I was just totally sold after that.
Mm-hmm. And then ever since then, you've been going back every year to these conventions and. learning?
Well, twice a year for AAJ and twice a year for MTMP. So I'm traveling around for conventions. Well, they're conventions, they're meetings. But yeah, it's a great opportunity. And like I said, the whole mass tort thing is it's teamwork. One firm, even one really big firm, cannot take on, these massive corporations. It's lots and lots of, I'm not going to say manpower, human power, lots of woman power, and lots of money to finance these litigations. So we need to work together, and these are great organizations that allow us to do that.
That's why we love these conventions too, is we get to collaborate with all these different law firms across the country. And that's a lot of the work that we do, is a lot of referrals. As we get cases in, we make these connections with these different law firms across the country that are focused on a wide variety of different cases. A lot of law firms will, focus primarily on a set group of cases. And so that's what we try to do is refer cases out to the people that are focused on them the most.
Right. Well, and so, no firm handles all of the different cases that are going on. And so, most firms have particular ones that they are working on. We have particular ones that we are working on in-house. But if it's a case we're not handling in-house, then we co-counsel with firms. And so that's, the really nice thing about these conventions is that you get to know the other people, their strengths and weaknesses, who's good on this particular type of case, who's good on that particular type of case, so that when you have a client, you can choose the best partner to work the case up together. So that's a lot of actually what you're doing now is, kind of working on those relationships, making new relationships, continuing co-counsel relationships.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Well, I'm looking forward to this weekend.
Yeah, it should be fun.
Well, I think we're going to go ahead and close out the show today. I think it went really well. Probably going to be our first full show up. I hope everyone enjoyed Prioritizing Profits with Sarah and Ben Showard. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to comment, email us, contact us any way you can. Follow Showard Law Firm on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, every social media you can. And we'll be back at it next week. We might upload all these at the same time. We're still kind of figuring out, learning it out as we go. But so far, so good.
All right. Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you. Hope everyone has a fantastic week.